Who is slow?
Hamilton, puncture, turn 12.
17 seconds, 16 seconds. Can we win this?
If you get on with it.
7 seconds to Verstappen.
Is that the last lap?
That's it, mate. You've done it. You've done it.
Oh, sake, mate.
He's a lucky boy. He's a lucky boy.
Well, that's it, mate.
The fourth round at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix delivered an incredible race, and it was centered all around the tire strategy and where the tire cliff was. And that's my favorite topic, so of course we're going to talk about it. In this video, you're going to get a brief timeline and breakdown of what really happened with the tires, where the meltdown really started, and all the implications for going into the 70th anniversary for Formula 1 next week at Silverstone. And if you thought this week's race was entertaining, you haven't seen anything yet. Stick around to find out why next week, that's going to be the interesting one. We'll get straight into the action with Max Verstappen's onboard, and we'll start with his because he actually was successful in getting through the race. Now, the reason he was successful was because Red Bull decided to take a controversial pit. Now, I'll explain the pit and why that was controversial, so to speak, in some circles, but let's just talk about what happened. All of the noteworthy action for Max begins on lap 46. He radios into his garage and says, "I'm not really feeling too comfortable with this front right tire." So his garage says they check the data, looks all good.
I'm a little bit afraid for this right front tire. What do you think?
We're monitoring it and we are happy, mate. We're happy. Temperatures look good and the tyre surface looks fine.
Now, I wanted to start with this message because with Max, this is the only message that comes through that actually speaks to that tire, and it's actually a positive one. But after the race, we hear Horner say that he's not sure if Max would have made it all the way through the race on that tire. Now, judging by what we know and what we see, the tire looks pretty good, and his engineer actually says, no, the tire's fine. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Nick, there could be plenty of things that we don't know about. Sure. There could be tons of things we don't know and that we'll never see, but this is about what we have and what we see and what's reasonable to assume. And what's reasonable to assume is what was given to Max is probably all that's available, or at least that's pertinent to the race. He asked the one question and they confirmed, no, the tire is perfectly good. I don't know why they would lie to their driver, and certainly Max could have given them more feedback had they asked. So we have to assume and take that at face value. That is the only time this is mentioned. I've gone through the onboards plenty of times, and if you're aware of something, make sure to send me the link and we can discuss that and we can look at the data. And on lap 46 is also where we hear Lando start to say to his engineer that Carlos needs to get a move on. He's getting pressured from Ricciardo from behind. Now, the reason Carlos can't get a move on is because he's experiencing some of the same delamination issues that Valtteri is experiencing right now. And as it turns out, while Lando Norris is actually trying to hold station and protect Carlos's lead and back Ricciardo up, he actually gets passed by Ricciardo eventually. But here's what that radio message sounds like that Lando sent to his garage about Carlos needing to pick it up.
Carlos needs to get a move on. Otherwise, I'm going to start to struggle more and the car is going to put me under pressure.
On the following lap, Carlos's engineer suggested he pick up the pace by saying he go to scenario 8. Carlos tries it out and says, I prefer scenario 9. It is important to note that Pirelli makes projections about their compounds and they say which tire strategy is going to be the best. As we look at the Pirelli compounds and how far that Mario Isola and Pirelli think their rubber are going to go, we can see that these compounds, they're pushing these stints to the limit, to 39, 40 laps even. So it's really not too far-fetched that we see the issues that we saw. Meanwhile, throughout the race, Valtteri has been experiencing increasingly more violent vibrations. It gets to a point where it's hard to even hear what he's saying. And on lap 50, Valtteri's nightmare comes true. His tire blows.
Something happened. So Verstappen in 2 seconds. Box, box, box.
You can actually see Max radio to his engineer in pit wall and say, I think Valtteri has a puncture. They see it a long way off and it gets worse and worse as it gets close.
Okay, Bottas is struggling, Max.
Yeah, he has a puncture, I think.
Yeah, he's slow.
Yeah, I'm also going to take it easy on this tire now, mate.
And up until this point, Max is still not told that his tire has a problem. But proactively, he says that he's going to take a little bit better care of it and make sure that he watches it because he doesn't want anything to happen. Now that he's seen that Valtteri has an absolute blown tire, he doesn't want that to happen to him. The controversy arises from the fact that Red Bull didn't wait to see if Lewis Hamilton was going to have some delamination issues. And in fact, it was clear that he had some tire problems. They can likely see that Hamilton's not doing too great on that front tire. He's at least watching it. And once you see Valtteri has full-blown delam, it's a good chance that Lewis is probably going to experience something similar. Now, hindsight is 20/20, but we can go way beyond that. We can actually look at the 1986 Australian Grand Prix, when that was actually the final race of the season. Famously, Nigel Mansell was on pace to get his first world title, but Lady Luck would not favor the Brit, as he would have a major tire blowout, ruining his chances at a title. And coincidentally, this would put Nelson Piquet right in line to pick up the world title. It turns out that Williams didn't want to risk it. They brought Nelson Piquet in to protect against what was probably a major delamination issue. Just one lap earlier, we have the 1982 World Driver Champion Keke Rosberg, who's driving with McLaren next to Alain Prost. He actually had a tire blowout. So it was pretty clear that Goodyear was experiencing some delamination issues. But I won't talk about that too much. If you want to see the video, there's a link down in the description to take you right to it. The point is, delamination is typically a terminal problem that goes with the car, not necessarily with the driving style. So bringing Verstappen in before Lewis Hamilton actually has delamination issues, now you've taken advantage of that situation off the table. But if you look at Red Bull's decision outside of delamination and any other tire issues with all the other teams, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's very common in Formula 1 for a driver to pit to get fresh rubber so he can get the fastest lap point, so long as the driver behind him is not inside his pit window, usually about 20-25 seconds. But the introduction of the tire issues, that changes the maths pretty significantly. The other thing to note with all of these tire failures was it was pretty difficult to see coming. They happened pretty quick, but the signs were there. You can start with looking at the splits of the sector times. As we can see here, we see Valtteri slowing down pretty significantly. A couple of laps prior to his blowout, we see Valtteri do a 131.797 versus Verstappen's 129.572. The following lap, we see him do a 131.051 versus Verstappen's 129.675. And as Valtteri is notified that Verstappen's gaining on him, he starts to pick up his sector times, and I think that's exactly what leads to the early blowout. Moving over to lap 51, Carlos is in real trouble. Ricciardo has now taken over Lando Norris, and he's now chasing down Carlos Sainz. Carlos switches over to scenario 7, and this is precisely where we see his failure come into focus.
Yeah, another vibrations. No, on the car right in the way. Copy.
He has to make it all the way back around with that blown tire.
Oh, puncture.
And in the process, he loses plenty of positions doing so. And it's gutting for Carlos and Carlos's fans because he was pretty comfortably in P4, albeit losing some ground and position to Ricciardo, who was advancing. He went from P4 to P14. As a McLaren fan, that might be a tough pill to swallow, especially knowing Lando Norris was held up a little bit, helping his teammate out defending against Ricciardo. He certainly lost out defending for Carlos, but that's what good teammates do, and I'm sure Carlos will return the favor. Red Bull pitting Max before Mercedes had actually pulled Lewis into pit. That wasn't the only error of the day. It was Lewis's decision not to pit. At that point, Max had already been into the pits. He had already seen Valtteri had a full-on blowout delamination of the tire. They also were at least aware of the fact that Carlos was having some pretty bad tire issues, if not seen his full-blown tire blowout. So after Max pit, this really made no sense not to bring in Lewis. It would have been a free pit stop.
But what it does do is it allows Hamilton a free pit stop as well. So it allows Mercedes to take the risk out of this for Hamilton's car now.
He was outside of the pit window of Verstappen, and also he could have stopped and got the fastest lap award. And just as Lewis passes the point of no return, he sees the pit lane trickle by him on the right. He's told that he's got just one more lap left, bring it home. And before he can even complete his radio message, the tire, boom, gives out.
I think something happened to my left tire also.
Okay, copy, same again.
You see sparks flying up on the side. It's over, at least so he thinks. But Lewis can't give up. And for some reason, at least for the benefit of us, Lewis's race engineer decides to make it as dramatic as humanly possible. Every few seconds, you can hear Bono count down the time to Verstappen's strike. 25 seconds to Verstappen, 22 seconds, 18 seconds.
17 seconds and 16 seconds. 7 seconds to Verstappen.
Is that the last lap?
That's it, mate. You've done it. Well, that's it, mate.
Meanwhile, Verstappen's garage is doing the same thing. Hamilton turned 20. Hamilton turned 15.
Who is slow?
Hamilton, Puncture, turned 12. Hamilton turned 15.
Verstappen's not even sure if he can get this done, so he asks his pit wall, can we actually win this race? And their reply,
Can we win this?
If you get on with it.
but ultimately, magically, somehow Lewis brings the car home, and he wins the race. on 3 wheels. So a race that saw plenty of early action, a lot of the soft runners getting the benefit from those safety cars. There were a lot of things at play, but ultimately what ruled the day? Tires. And that's not going to change. When we go to Silverstone next week, we are moving to 1 step softer compounds. Not only that, it is projected to be a warmer race. Softer compounds plus warmer temperatures is sure to mean a more interesting race. So if that's what you're into, make sure to check out all of the coverage here on the channel or the social medias. I'll pop up on screen. And leading up to the race, I'll post a video honoring the 70th birthday at the Formula One Championship, showing the top 5 moments at Silverstone. And of course, there's a lot more to come beyond that. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you very, very soon.